Morning, everyone. While I'm setting up, I have had multiple questions this morning about what's going to happen with the honey. Be assured, we will get to that. But I wanted to say thank you firstly for being here, and it's a real privilege for me to be here this morning. And I wanted to say hello to all the people online. I know there's lots of people who watch each week online, and so just a special mention to them once again. Knightsbridge Baptist has a really special place in my heart. Dave and I have been doing Red Frogs for a few years, and this year especially, you guys have just been amazing over the past 12 months in terms of some of the stuff you're doing to support young folk and young adults. I do a lot of resident mentoring, which means I head into the city, into places like Urban Nest, which are student accommodation. And what's been happening is you guys have this amazing support team, and Sue's kind of been working in that space. But you've been making these amazing care packages, and I take them in to the place, to Urban Nest, and I watch the way that the RAs, the resident assistants, light up, because all of a sudden they have something that they can give to those students who they notice who are particularly struggling or are having a rough day. And it changes their whole countenance. You watch the stress melt away, and then we go door knocking, and so we find some of these students who are particularly struggling, and we give them this, and we let them know that we actually care and that we actually want to visit and actually have a chat to them, and they're able just to take their mind off study. A lot of these students have got lots of pressure. They're international students. They have that kind of pressure to succeed placed on them, and some of them don't leave their room from week to week. And so unfortunately, we might be the only human interaction that they have outside of the Uber driver that hands them the food. And so for us to actually say, you matter, you care, we're actually going to stop and have a 20-minute conversation with you and see how you're actually going, that means something. So yeah, I really want to thank you, before I even get going, just that has been a huge gift as we have partnered together with you guys in Urban Nest in the city. So thank you, and please continue that, because it is so valuable to us. My understanding is this series that we've been in, the series about how we follow, it's a very practical series. The last couple of weeks we've been looking at ways to kind of practically implement things. And the summer series is, I think, a really great place for that. We're usually kind of in that summer mode still. We're low key, so we're going to continue that. Last week I heard that you got some pens and paper and spent some time listening to God and hearing what God actually might be having to say. This week we're going to be doing. I've continued that. I've brought some honey along, and we're going to do something with that in a moment. So I want to start. We're going to throw some questions around back and forth, and I'll do my best to kind of compare for the people online so they can hear what's being said. But I want to start with a photo, if we can. And what I want you to do in a COVID-safe way is turn to the person next to you, and where possible, keep 1.5 metres distance. I want you to tell me who you think this man is and what his occupation is. And I wonder whether you can see it. There's an armed weapon that he has kind of slung to his side. I wonder whether that will give you a hint or completely throw you off the scent of what this particular person is. So turn to the person next to you. What is this man's occupation? We'll throw it out there. I'll give you about a minute. Off you go. Okay, let's bring it back in. What do we think? Is there anyone brave enough to volunteer a guess as to what this man's occupation is? Up the back there, Dave, yes?
Bianca and Josh have decided it's a Jewish James Bond on holidays somewhere in the Middle East.
A Jewish James Bond somewhere on holidays in the middle of the Middle East. That is incorrect, but close. Anyone else? Is a photographer. Yes, that's close, but not quite. Anyone else? No. What were some of the other suggestions? He is, in fact, a kindergarten teacher. Would you believe it? So in 2015, I had the opportunity to head to Israel, and I spent some wonderful time there, and it was beautiful to kind of walk around and see what was new and what really in many ways hasn't changed in 2,000 years. And one of the amazing things that is still happening today is the kindergarten teachers are incredibly experiential in their learning philosophy. So one of the things they love to do is they love to take their kids around, and instead of it being like a classroom where the kids are sitting and they're learning, every single day the kindergarten teachers will bowl their kids out from when they first collect them, and they'll take them somewhere experientially. So they'll take them to the park, and they'll play around in the park. They'll take them out. If they're going to do art, they'll actually go to an art museum and do something like that. And today we're at the Western Wall, and they're visiting the Western Wall, and he's looking around and considering what's going on. One of the really fascinating parts about teaching the Torah, or when you're teaching the Torah, is that it's more than just a rote learning thing. We often kind of paint this one-dimensional picture of religion as something that they kind of have to learn and caught and taught kind of thing over and over and over again. And maybe that was your experience in high school. But what's really interesting is that for these Jewish kindergarten teachers, there's this long tradition of teaching that is so much more than just rote learning. It's this experiential thing. They're being taught not just to parrot it, but actually to enact it. And I just wonder this morning, when we think about our faith, whether it's like that. Is it an experiential thing that we do, or is it something that we kind of tend to pile information onto you when we're here on a Sunday morning? What's really interesting is that the very first lesson that kids get taught in a Jewish community, the very first lesson they get taught when they go to kindy for their first day, is that it's experiential. This experience of God is more than just something that happens and you read about it and learn about it. What they would do is they would take some honey and they would drizzle the honey all over the tablets, the stone tablets of the law. And what they would get the children to do is to go up to the tablets. Now, we can't do this because it's not COVID safe. And they would start licking the tablets, because what they wanted the kids to realize was that the law was good, that it was wonderful, and it was tasty, and it was rich, and it was beautiful. So what I want you to do this morning, I want to get into this experiential idea. You've got the honey before you. What I want you to do, hopefully, yes, we're actually going to eat honey. All right, if you haven't got some, put your hands up and Sue will come around and pass out some. If there's any missed, I think there's someone down the front here that hasn't got some honey. I want you to experience this morning. Dip your finger in the honey. Oh, what happens? Taste it. What does it taste like? It's really sweet, isn't it? This following Jesus thing, it's not meant to be dry and rote. It's meant to be experiential right from the very beginning. It's meant to be something that we do. Something that we do in the going. Dave's asked me to come here today and talk a little bit about something that I'm really passionate about, which is discipleship. And one of the things I love to do is hang out with young people, hang out with young adults, and kind of do life with them. And what I'm really wanting to impart onto you today, and hopefully you'll catch it, is this idea that when we follow Jesus, it's more than just something that we learn, it's more than something that we imbibe, it's more than just a set of rules that we kind of suck in and parrot back. It's actually something experiential that we do become a part of. So I want us to think about how Jesus actually did this whole discipleship thing this morning. Can some of us, I'm going to go break out again, can some of us think about some of the contexts that Jesus actually discipled his disciples at? What were some of the places that we found Jesus at? That's my question. All right, go break out again for another 30 seconds to a minute. What were some of the contexts that Jesus discipled his disciples? Where was he? Was he at a football game? Or was he paying his taxes? Or what was he doing? 30 seconds to a minute. What were some of the contexts that Jesus was discipling his disciples? Go. Okay, let's come back in. Where were some of the places that Jesus discipled his disciples? In people's houses, very good. Where else? Fishing. I hear that Dave's on a fishing trip soon at some point. Yes. Breakfast at the lake, fantastic. You're catching the idea. Where else? Walking along as they go. Yeah, brilliant. Where else? At the well, at a place where they were just going to collect water. Yes. In a synagogue, very good as well. Yes. I heard at a wedding. Who said that? At the back, fantastic. Right, we're starting to get this idea. What's going on here? Jesus isn't just meeting with these people for, say, a small portion of their time during the week. What Jesus is doing is he's doing life on life together. Have you noticed that? The Jesus way is doing life together. That's a little bit different to the way that we sometimes think about things. I want you to, I'm kind of riffing off the book of John here this morning, but at the very beginning of John, it talks about this idea. He's just met his first disciples. And I want to take you to this small little bit where most people might not even realise that he's actually doing something. It gets overlooked. We're in John 1:39. I just want to read out this verse to you. So he's just met Andrew and Peter, and they say, "Rabbi, where are you staying?" And he says, "Come and you'll see." So they went and saw where he was staying. Pay attention to this little bit here. And he spent the day with him. And it was about the 10th hour. So that's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. All right, now flip over. We're in John 3. All right, 3:22. He's just spoken to Nicodemus. After this, Jesus and his disciples went out into the Judean countryside where he spent some time with them and then he baptized. There are these kind of context verses that we skip over because we're keen to get to the next story. What happens next? Okay, Jesus baptized. There's that person who's blind. But in the midst of all of that, there's life going on. It's countercultural. The Eugene Peterson version of John 1:14, the idea that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, is this different picture. It's that the Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighbourhood. What would it look like if we were a community that moved into the neighbourhood, actually saw this as our place that we were located and situated in? What's really interesting about the way that Jesus disciples his disciples is that it's relational. It's long-term, right? It's not just here and then gone. We're here for the long haul. And he goes out to find them. Did you notice that? That's really countercultural. In Jewish culture, what would happen is you would locate a rabbi that you would like to teach, to learn from, and you would sit under them and learn from them. What's really fascinating about this is the picture that Jesus goes out and finds his disciples and says, "Come and be part of me." Now, for a fisherman who's sitting in this culture, in this context, this is huge because they've been rejected from the schools that we're talking about, the schools where the rabbis grow up and learn and become adults. At a certain point, they haven't cut mustard. They haven't been able to learn Torah, and so they've gone back to the countryside to do fishing. And here's this rabbi that says, "Hang on, I'm actually giving you an opportunity to come unto me and be part of me." Can you imagine that? This whole new opportunity. What would that look like if we were to think about the people who we have kind of thought, "Oh, no, that person is not good enough to do this or this"? What happens if we were to find those people who are the scallywags and the misfits in our community? I often find in my own world, those are the people who are most eager to do something because they're looking for someone to actually value them and say, "I see you." In practice, when I'm discipling, what does this look like? Well, it means I'm hanging out with the blokes that I hang out with on a semi-regular basis. We hang out a fair bit. They're part of my friendship circle. They're the people who I want to hang out with the most. They're part of my family. And I see them like they're my younger brothers. We do life together. We eat meals. I have a rule. I have one rule when I hang out with teenagers. There must be food. There must be food. I don't matter whether it's a big meal or a small meal. There must be food, right? Because this is the way that Jesus does things. You're right. There's a wedding. There's a banquet. There's a festival that he's at. This is the way that Jesus does things. And it's long term. The other night there was this rending moment. I was at my friend's house. I've been discipling this bloke for 10 years now. And he's moving up to the Northern Territory to be a doctor up there. And it's this moment of celebration for me as he's heading up there to do that. But it's also this awful heart moment because this brother who I've been hanging out with for 10 years is now leaving me. And so it's exciting to kind of commission him and go, do it as I've done it, right? But at the same time, there's this sadness. And this life-on-life thing, it's messy. A couple of years ago on Christmas Eve, I got a knock on the door. It was 11 o'clock at night. I opened up the door. I'm in my PJs by this time, and it was a stinker. It was about 37 degrees still. I open up the door. I'm bleary-eyed. I just managed to get to sleep, and the police are at the door. Do you know where Dave is? They said. I said, sorry, who? And he's still waking up. Do you know where Dave is? These police officers with their flashlights are at my door. They're looking for a kid who's in the guardianship of the minister that's gone missing. Right? And they go, we know that you spend lots of time with Dave. And so we thought you might know where Dave is. And I said, look, I'm really sorry, officers. I actually don't know where Dave is. The last time I saw him was on this date, and there was this youth event that he was at. When you do this kind of life-on-life stuff, it gets messy. You find yourself rubbing up against people who you would never think you would hang out with. Right? These people who are on the fringes of communities and marginalised people, right? They become family, and you don't think about them as people who are on the fringes of communities and people who are marginalised. You see them as just family. And so my heart went out for Dave because I was like, what's happened? Where is he? Why isn't he at home? Why has he found himself kind of alone? When you do this life-on-life discipleship thing, you start to get these late-night phone calls. You hang out with people when they're at their worst. It's different, right? It's different to the kind of sometimes transactional relationship that you have with people in your life. You invite them in and they become family. What would it look like if we were a community that saw one another like that? That it wasn't just something that we attended or a place that we went to, but actually a family that we actually did this kind of discipleship journey together. The second thing I want to share today is that the Jesus way goes deep and it's real, right? They're real with one another. So we're going to break out again. When you think about Jesus and the types of conversations that he had with his disciples, what were they? Were they really shallow things or were they deep things? What kind of conversations did Jesus have? I'll give you 30 seconds on that one again. Off you go. Okay, and wrap up that thought. What do we notice about some of the conversations that Jesus has? Yes. Yes, okay. Are they deep or are they shallow? It goes deep, doesn't it? He gets straight to the point. They're life substance kind of conversations. What else? What are some of the other conversations we notice that Jesus has? Say again, sorry? They're personal, right? I often find that we live in a kind of grunt, nod kind of land where we go, oh, hey, how you going? That kind of thing, right? These conversations go right to the deep. They talk about the F word, feelings, which for blokes I think is particularly hard to share sometimes, right? They go right down to the centre and the core of people. What else do we notice? Their stories and parables, right? Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, so he doesn't give them kind of a set of behaviours to kind of keep up with. Rather, he goes, hey, here's some stories, here's some questions. What would it look like? What do you see in this story? What does it mean to you? Very different. At the back there. He told them off, yes. Oh, we often gloss over that. Jesus meek and mild, right? Jesus isn't afraid in these relationships that he develops to actually call them on their stuff. How fascinating. That's different. Can I share a confession with you? Something that I've really been wrestling with this week. I just wonder sometimes whether in church and the churches that I've been a part of, and certainly the relationships I've formed in church, whether they've sometimes been a little bit too sanitized to even get to that point. And when I'm reflecting on the life of Jesus, I really struggle with that. I'm like, oh my goodness, here are these deep relationships. Here they are. They're convicting one another. They're doing this. Oh, I really want that. But just so often I've just been part of churches that are just too afraid to get there. It ends up feeling like a doctor's surgery. Like rubber gloves snap as if there's some sort of examination about to happen. You're like, ugh, right? I don't want to project that onto you because I know that this is an amazing community. But I just wonder, perhaps there's been some times in your walk with Jesus where you felt that way too. I don't see that in the life of Jesus. And so in practice, when I'm discipling people, here's what I try and do. I don't get there all the time, but I'm trying to do this. I try and go deep with young folk. Nothing's off limits. We talk about our struggles. It's both ways. What's going well, what's not going so well. Everything about me is in view. I open it up like a book, right? And they see what I do well and what I don't do well. And sometimes young people are the best people to kind of be honest and be like, that was terrible, James. You can't say that. And I'm like, no, I can't. Thank you so much for making that obvious to me. Right? And I ask them to imitate me. Do it like how I do it. And then when there's something in my life that is really messy, that doesn't work, and I'm struggling with that and being open about that, I say, hey, don't follow me in this. Follow that person. They do that really well. You should hang out with them for a little bit because they'll help you out with that thing. And I've noticed at a really practical level, when we're discipling people, usually it means I have to have the courage to go first. Right? People don't open up until you do. And so I want to invite you, what would it look like to be really gutsy in these kind of relationships, in your community, in your faith, right? To be the kind of person that opens up first and says, this is what I'm really struggling with, or this is how my faith's going. How's this going? The result is that you get this kind of life rubbing up on each other. I just wonder whether you allow people to get that close into your life, to actually see it that way, to be able to imitate it, or is it at arm's distance? You're holding people off. Right. The next kind of piece of practical advice I want to give to you is that the Jesus that I encounter in the Gospels, he incarnates his message. He becomes his message, right? In order to live it out. So, I want you to break up into groups again. Can you think of some examples of the way that Jesus actually embodied his message of the good news? How did he become his message of the good news? Off you go. I'll give you another minute. And wrapping up that thought, I know I haven't been giving you long enough, have I? Sparking discussion and you want to keep going, don't you? Can we think of some examples where Jesus radically embodied the message that he had? Yes, down here.
This was my granddaughter, but she said the message that he died for sin, he became that message by doing it.
Yes, amazing. That's profound. Look at that. What else do we discover? Yes. Oh my goodness, yes. You ready? This is good news for these people, isn't it? You are part of my family. Like, actually, you are part of my family. Amazing. What else did we discover? We've forgotten how to do it. I heard that down there. That is beautiful. We've forgotten how to do that. Yes. Oh, that's challenging. I think we've got a prophet down here that we need to listen to. Would you like to finish off the message this morning? Honestly, yes, we've forgotten how to do that. What else have we noticed? Yes. So he declared that this person was right with me, because as in God, he goes, I am God, and you are right with me. You are forgiven. That is amazing. Can you imagine coming into that community where everyone else has said no, and here is God incarnate saying, yes, you're part of my family. Amazing. What's really interesting when I was talking to some of the rabbis when I was in Israel is that they say that the message has to be so deep down. The good news of your life has to be so deep down that you have to become it. You have to internalize it. You have to incarnate it so that you can become a walking ray of light. These are their words. I found that really fascinating from these rabbis. So that it becomes contagious and attractive. Because at the fundamental level for these rabbis, when they're talking about it, Judaism was never meant to be a religion in the sense of a bunch of rules to be memorized, but an invitation to family and life with God. I remember in 2011 I had the opportunity to head over to America, and I was in Florida, and there are a lot of things that can be said about Florida, but my primary experience of it was through a guy called Michael. And Michael was an American, and he said, James, I want you to experience what grace feels like this weekend. And so, for the next 2 days while I was there, I spent a weekend with Michael. Michael proceeded to share with me the most amazing generosity you could possibly imagine. He took me out to the fanciest restaurant in all of Florida. He took me to do all of these amazing things. We went dolphin riding. Dolphin riding, that's not a thing. We went to see dolphins. We went to Disney World. We went on a helicopter ride because he thought that was the most amazing thing ever that we should do. What he was doing was he was lavishing his love on me. He was being incredibly extravagant, incredibly over the top. Right? It was this profound embodiment of what it means to know and have the love of Jesus in his own unique way. There was a very American way of doing things. But in my mind, I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. Here's this bloke that's living out what it looks like to be radically and overwhelmingly loved. What would it look like if we would incarnate the story? In practice, for me, what I've been trying to do in order to become that walking ray of light. The last couple of years, I've really been trying to incarnate the story of the Good Samaritan. What would it look like to live that out? What would it look like if there's someone on the side of the road to actually stop? I've met all sorts of wonderful people as I've been doing that. Only a couple of weeks ago, I was with a young bloke, and we were just going out for a walk, and this lady had fallen over in her house, and she tripped and fallen. And there's that part of me that goes, oh, we'll just keep going because I've got this kind of this person, their time, they run out of time, I don't really want to do that, oh, that's a bit awkward, what if I have to go up and meet them? And then there was that other voice that we hear at the end of that story where Jesus invites us to go and do likewise. Darn you, Jesus. Right? And so we stop and we start helping out this lady and we start talking to her and we find out that her next door neighbour's a nurse. She's fallen over, she's badly hurt her head. So we go over to the neighbour and we get the neighbour to come over and help her out. Right? And we be with this person. Right? I don't think I'm doing an amazing job at this thing, and the amount of times I drive past someone that has their hazard lights on or something like that, it still annoys me. But what I've really been trying to do is to try and incarnate this message, to live it out, so that when I see someone like that, I can stop and I can ask them, hey, are you okay? Can I do something? Like, I don't know mechanical stuff, but I've got some friends that do. I could bring them up. They might be able to help you. Do you need any water while you're waiting for the REA to come? Could I go and buy you a meal? Can I just hang out with you so that you don't feel lonely and on the side of the road having to kind of to be bored while you're waiting? What would it look like if we were a community that incarnated and embodied the message of Jesus? The final thing I want to wrap up with today is that the Jesus way, this discipleship thing that happens, has an expectation of replication. I had a mentor once ask me, how do you know whether you're a disciple of Jesus? And he would say, disciples make disciples, right? Disciples make disciples. What's really fascinating is that when Jesus ends his ministry on earth, he doesn't come to overthrow the Pharisees, right? When he's resurrected from the dead in all of his glory. He doesn't come back and overthrow the Pharisees and sit down on the temple and say, hurrah, right? He doesn't march off to Rome to say, I'm the true king of the world. What's really interesting is that he takes his crew back to sleepy Galilee, right back to where it all began, sits on the top of the mountain with them, gets back on track. This is what really matters. Go and make disciples of all nations. Teaching, obeying, baptizing. They're all ing words, they're participle words, they're doing words. It's the great reminder, as much as it is the Great Commission, to keep doing what they've already been doing. And I wonder sometimes, again, this is probably more a reflection on me than it is on this wonderful community, if we lose sight of what really matters. There's the building, there's the maintaining of the professional worship standards that we've all got to try and keep up to. I just wonder sometimes whether we're being a body, whether we're being a family on mission together, whether we're actually making disciples. What's really interesting in that Jesus way is that there's an expectation of maturity and then replication. He doesn't do life this way to just leave it as it is. He goes, hoping this will rub off on you. Disciples make disciples. It's that simple. What would it look like if this was a community that took those words seriously, right? Do you follow? Do you make disciples? What could that be? There are so many amazing people here, and they don't look a day over 21, to be honest. But I was surprised to learn that, in fact, many of you are, in fact, senior citizens. It surprises me. You guys don't look a day over 21. But you have something amazing to offer. Oh, look, I had to have one preachy joke in there. Come on, please. Please give me some slack there. You have something deeply valuable to offer to the world. You do. You have your wisdom, your experience. You have been living this thing out when everyone else has been saying, nah, that's not for me. Please invest in us. I'm serious. Please invest in young people. Please invest in people who are your age. Do life together. Please don't check out just because you've retired. Be nimble. See how things may have changed and might need a different approach. Adopt us. Adopt us as if we were family. You could adopt a family and become grandparents to them. You could adopt some young people and be brothers and sisters to them. Please pray with us. And actually pray with us. Like instead of saying, I'll pray for you, say, hey, can I come over to your house and can we pray together? Pray for us. Who are you discipling? Who's discipling you? What would it look like if we became a community that did the same kind of life-on-life discipleship, that Jesus way that we've been talking about this morning? What would that look like? Let's pray. Father, thank you that you didn't just give us a set of rules to follow, but you gave us yourself to live with and to be with in the person of the Holy Spirit. Lord, we ask that you would give us a fresh insight on what it looks like to actually lead this out. Would you give us the courage to consider what it might mean to actually make disciples in our community, to actually be someone who disciples, to actually take that step from living a Christian life into a life of replication of who you are. You give us courage to meet those young people, to meet those adults, and to say, hey, can you disciple me? Can you teach me something? Please give us the wisdom and the maturity and the faith as a community to know how to do that in a way that honours you. In your name we pray. Amen. Thank you so much.